Good afternoon. I'm Melanie White, President of the Women's Club. Welcome members in the auditorium and welcome to members that are viewing online. Following today's program, please join us in the Halsey Hall to meet Kathleen Biggins. Kathleen has an amazingly educational presentation for us today, and it is going to run almost an hour, so we'll try and fit in as many questions as we can, but to be respectful of your time, what we'll do is right around our 3 o'clock end point, we will move to the Halsey Hall, and Kathleen would love to talk with you to answer your questions there. I am just delighted to announce a huge number of new members. And if you're here in the audience and I call your name, would you please raise your hand so that we may greet you? Amatul Malik Falani, Ann Sholater, Carol Waite, Christine Spiro, Cindy Buckler, Dale Hilton, Dana Jenkins, Deborah Roy, Hannah Owen, Jackie Jackson, Janet Eason, Joyce Berg, Laura Rice, Lee Whedon, Linda Topol, Mary Bates, Marcia Grodnicki Slocum, Mickey Ogburn, and Patricia Cruikshank. What a wonderful, large number of new members and reinstatements for us. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you particularly to our proposers, who are Ann Stewart-Belk, Becky Walker, Bucci Zigner, Cicely Powell, Elizabeth Updaya, Gibney Husky, Katie Gooch, Lenore Kapelovich, Linda Carlson, Melanie White, Melissa Marion, Susan Morrison, and Catherine O'Neill and Ginny Purcell, all proposers of our new members. Thank you. I have great news from our gala, Hard Hats and High Heels. Thank you to our Women's Club members who were sponsors, donors, and donators of auction items. We raised over $43,000 for renovations and maintenance projects to benefit the Bowling Haxel House. Yes, and this is a good time for me to remind you that your dues do not pay to maintain our Bowling Haxel House. It is only through donations and benefits from our auction and gala that take care of the Bowling Haxel House. This Wednesday, November 12th, from 10 to noon, the Women's Club Library is open to members on the second floor of the Bowling Haxel House. Remember, our catalog is available via the Library tab in the Members area of our website. Make Your Own Holiday Wreath special event is November 15th from 3 to 5 p.m. Registration deadline for this is December 1st. Please join our holiday reception on December 8th from 1 to 3. The registration deadline for this is December 1st. Thank you to the Communications Committee for providing our refreshments today. Thank you to Cheryl Magazine for serving as chair of the day. Cheryl will now introduce Kathleen Biggins. Now, silence your cell phones, please. Last week, we didn't do as well as we could have, so please get it out of your purse and take a look. Make sure that it's silenced. Thank you.
I'm shrinking. Good afternoon. On behalf of the program committee, thank you so much for being with us here today at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Our club prides itself on being respectfully provocative since 1894. We are joined today by Kathleen Biggins, founder and CEO of Sea Change Conversations, who will give us the tools to discuss the topic of climate change in our inimitable fashion. Raised in New Orleans, Kathleen loves the South. She attended the University of Virginia, where she was an Eccles Scholar and lived on the lawn. After graduating, she returned to New Orleans and worked as a reporter at the local newspaper. She thinks her front page story on carriage horses dying from extreme heat may have been her first awareness of climate change. She flew far from the nest to attend Albert Ludwig University in Freiburg, Germany as a Rotary Scholar, and then settled in New York City upon her return to the States. She pursued a career in advertising and marketing in the city and then in Princeton, New Jersey, where she and her husband relocated to raise their family. Kathleen's interest in gardening led her to join a local garden club, and that ultimately led her to today's topic, understanding the impact of climate change. In 2006, she attended the Garden Club of America's National Legislative Conference in Washington on behalf of her local club. That's where she heard military and business leaders say that the risk from climate change is real and imminent. Kathleen recognized the risk, but learned that few people were talking about it because it was seen as such a polarizing and far-off topic. In 2014, she pulled together a team to create Sea Change Conversations with the goal of depoliticizing the issue and helping others understand how it might impact them personally. Kathleen wrote the Sea Change Conversations Primer, a nonpartisan, science-based presentation that has been lauded by both conservative politicians and chief scientists of internationally known climate organizations. Sea Change has received accolades from leaders in government, finance, health, and education, as well as recognition by the Southeastern Conference of the World Presidents Organization, the Financial Executives Networking Group, the Garden Club of America, Rotary International, and the Land Trust Alliance. In 2023, Kathleen represented Sea Change at COP28, the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Dubai, which hosted 85,000 climate leaders from around the globe. The primer has been presented to a wide range of businesses and associations, reaching over 23,000 people in 33 states and internationally. And today, it is our pleasure to welcome Kathleen Biggins and learn from her Sea Change Conversations Primer. Oh.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and it has been such a delight to spend some time with many of you. It is such a joy to be back in Richmond and to be back in the South, which indeed I do love and I miss when I'm up in New Jersey. So I know we're short on time, so I'm going to jump right into it. Whenever we walk into a room to talk about climate change, we recognize that we don't walk in alone. We say that we walk in with 3 elephants in the room with us. And the first elephant in the room with us is the fact that we all know that the climate has always been changing due to natural causes. We've had crocodiles in the Arctic, we've had ice ages, but this time scientists say it's different, that after a period of remarkable stability for over 10,000 years, humans, through our activities, are triggering a period of instability. And we're doing it when there are 8 billion of us on the planet today, 10 billion projected by mid-century. And we can't just pick up our lean-tos and follow the food and water resources as they react to a changing climate. The second elephant in the room with us is the fact that fossil fuels have been incredible friends to us. Before we discovered them, our lives were short and brutal. They have given us a vibrant economy and a high quality of life. But scientists warn, if we continue to use them the same way we have in the past, they will begin to do the opposite, actually lower our GDP and lessen our quality of life, especially for our kids and our grandkids. And the third elephant in the room with us is the fact that this is such a tough topic to talk about. Perhaps it is banned from your Thanksgiving table? Yeah, it was from mine for many years. But it wasn't always thus. George W. Bush, the Republican president, was elected saying he was going to beat the greenhouse with the White House. There were multiple bipartisan bills introduced every year of his 2 terms. In 2007, Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader, congressional leader, and Oh my goodness. Hold on. Senate congressional leader before Nancy, that was Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich. Woo! So sorry. Let's go back that way. Nancy and Newt on a couch, cheek by jowl, saying that climate change was real and that a cap and trade approach was the way to go. And in 2008, it was on both parties' presidential platforms, not necessarily agreeing on how to address it, but agreeing that it was something that needed to be addressed. So what happened? Well, a lot of things. But one of the things that social scientists have pointed to is the fact that when Al Gore won the Nobel Peace Prize for his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, it was a watershed moment. The left was joyful, but many on the right, not so much. And by putting Al Gore's face on the issue, it suddenly had become a new litmus test for what makes a good liberal or what makes a good conservative. And the media didn't help. On the left, many in the media said we needed to be anti-car, anti-cow, and anti-capitalist. And on the right, Fox News had about 50% of its coverage in 2006 saying climate change was real. But by 2009, 90% said it was a hoax. And it was being covered more as a social war issue than a scientific one. And so we had a real hardening across party lines. But if you fast forward to today, the vast majority of Americans understand that something's happening, that climate change is indeed real. And the majority understand that humans are influencing it. But where we really can't seem to agree is how to evaluate the risk. Is it an existential risk, as the UN Secretary General has said, that if we don't pivot hard to address will harm our economies and harm our children? Or is it more of a tempest in a teapot? Or, as the Secretary of Energy has said, just an inconvenience that we need to accept in order to have a modern world? And most of us are stuck in the middle, wanting to do the right things for our kids and grandkids and believing in the ethic of stewardship, of leaving the world at least as good as what we received. But we also don't want to get pulled into something that often seems over-alarmist and overhyped. So how should we evaluate this tricky risk of climate change? Well, we would suggest that we evaluate it the way we would any other major risk in our personal or business lives. And social scientists say that normally, in assessing a risk, we divide it into 3 parts. How likely is it to happen? This clicker is not registering. It's just lagging? Okay. Okay, let's try. So the first part is how likely is it to happen. The second is how dangerous are the potential consequences. And the third is how difficult is it to avoid the risk. Hold on, guys, this isn't going to work for me if it's lagging this much. Jackson, what can we do?
Let me swap the...
So sorry, I can't hear you.
I can click for you.
Okay, when I do that, switch, does that work for you? Okay, that's how we'll do it. Okay, so this is a quiz. What are the 3 parts of risk assessment? I'm serious, come on, were you listening? All right. Okay, wonderful, thank you. So let's jump into that first part. How likely is it to happen? And we know that, in fact, it's more than likely to happen. We know that it is happening. And the way that we know it is happening is because we understand the basic physics of how greenhouse gases work. It has been well understood for over 150 years and is non-controversial. So let's jump back to 6th grade science class for a minute and remember how greenhouse gases work. So when the solar radiance comes down, it passes through the atmosphere and strikes the Earth's surface. That's not working. Strikes the Earth's surface. No. Much of that energy is absorbed, but quite a lot of it ricochets back out into space. And when it does so, it is at a different wavelength. And this new wavelength is partially captured by a teeny tiny portion of our atmosphere made up of greenhouse gases, which we know of as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and even water vapor. They make up less than 1% of the atmosphere. Yet without them, we would have a frozen planet, and none of us would be here. But when we add to them, it simply means they do that job better. They capture more of the ricocheting energy and re-radiate more of it back down to the surface, heating us up and adding energy into our climate systems. Another way to think about this is the balance of carbon that has really existed since modern humans have been on the planet. And we all know that there's a balance between plants and animals with carbon dioxide, right? But we may not know there's also a balance in where nature stores it. In the atmosphere, in the oceans, and in the soils and plants on the Earth. And I'd like to call your attention to these two words at the very bottom, fossil fuels, because I think if we consider what they are, we understand what's going on. So fossil fuels are little bits of plant and animal matter that fell to the Earth millions of years ago and got silted over, and with time, heat, and pressure, got turned back into pools of elemental carbon, what we call natural gas, coal, and oil. And humans came along and said, wow, really, really rich in energy, really portable, really storable. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it to heat my homes, to power my transportation, to run my factories, and to build this incredible economy that has supported all of us. But in doing so, humankind was taking carbon that nature had sequestered deep underground over millions of years and started to pump it up into the atmosphere at the alarmingly fast rate of over 40 billion tons of carbon every single year, much faster than it happens in nature, and much faster than nature can reabsorb it to put it back into balance. And because we know that if we add more carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, it will inevitably lead to more temperature, it is no surprise that all of the major institutions that measure our Earth's global average temperature say the exact same thing. And that is that last year, our temperature had hit about 1.5 degrees C, or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than during the Industrial Revolution. And the thing that is so alarming about this, guys, is how rapid this ascent is. It's happening at a speed that it doesn't happen normally in nature. And that means that all of the species that share the Earth with us can't evolve as quickly as they have in the past when nature changed in a much more moderate tempo. So it's the speed that really is so concerning. Whoop. Another way that we know it's happening is we can see it with our own eyes. Take a look at this graphic from NOAA that shows how the Arctic ice is melting and leaching away. Now, so what you're seeing is mature ice in white being replaced by immature ice and open water in blue and dark blue. And the reason why this is so critically important is because this mature ice is highly reflective. It means that more of that initial solar radiance that comes down re-radiates back out into space. When we lose it, it means more of that initial radiance gets absorbed, heating us up further for future generations. Another way we know it's happening, and that we know that in fact humans are the ones causing it, is the fact that we can measure the carbon dioxide that comes from our activities from burning fossil fuels once they hit the atmosphere. Atmospheric chemists can discern which molecules come from our activities. And that's because they have a different isotope, a different atomic thumbprint, if you will. So indeed, we know we are driving these changes. And yet another way we know it is happening is we have the ability to look back into time, to see how today is different than yesteryear. And we do this through a discipline called paleoclimatology. And scientists like this one look at things like ancient ice cores that can be as much as 800,000 years old. And he's looking for an air pocket that was captured when snow fell and froze over. And when he liberates that air pocket, he can discern what the carbon dioxide levels were going back 800,000 years. And what does this show us? That we are in uncharted territory, that modern humans have never experienced carbon dioxide levels as high as we have them today. Now, let's take a look at this chart. You can see that our average carbon dioxide levels bandied between 150 and, say, 300 parts per million for the last 800,000 years. And these were through the natural cycles the Earth normally goes through an ice age and a thaw, and another ice age and a thaw. And then you can see in 1910, we broke out of the natural patterns, crossing over 300 parts per million. And today we are at around 425 parts per million. And scientists said if we were to continue on our current emissions path, we would get between 600 and 700 parts per million by the end of this century. So hopefully you are with me that climate change is indeed really happening. So let's move to that second part of the risk assessments. What are the potential consequences? And are they ones we're comfortable living with if they come to pass, or ones we really want to avoid? So I'm going to go through a lot of natural changes in the world around us. But I want to encourage you to look at these changes through three specific lenses. How will these changes impact the greater economy and jobs in your area? How will they impact your and your family's health and personal security? And how will it impact your exposure to geopolitical insecurity, which we really kind of experience as exposure to refugee flows, civil chaos, and even terrorism? Now, does anyone want to take a guess as to why I'm asking you to look through these specific lenses at changes in our natural world? Any brave soul? Nobody? Because these are the three things that Americans say are most important to them when they go to vote. And we believe that climate change will negatively and impact all three. So let's see if you agree. Take a look at this graphic showing how our temperature has changed. This is a graphic from NASA showing how average global temperature has changed. Can you run this, please? From pre-industrial times to today. When it is blue, it is colder than average, white average, yellow warmer, and red hotter. So as you can see, the red really comes crescendoing in. And again, this is NASA's rendition. This is not sea changes. Let's take one more look at what that looks like on a bar chart. What it looks like on a bar chart is a steep incline. And it shows that the 10 hottest years on record were the last 10. The hottest year on record was last year. And what that means is that nature is kind of moving out of the normal norms that she used to be circumscribed with. And we're seeing that our temperature is getting hotter and more extreme. And that means our heat waves are more frequent, they're hotter, and they're longer. And that is definitely true right here in Richmond, where you have 13 more days over 90 degrees than you did back in 1970. But that's just a snapshot of what's already happening. The carbon dioxide that we're putting up in the atmosphere will continue to make things much hotter for our kids and our grandkids. So what will your grandkids experience at the end of the century living in the Richmond area? Well, they're going to experience summers that are currently experienced in central Texas, about 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit hotter. And if you have any family in Phoenix, it's even a bit more alarming. Phoenix is expected to have temperatures like cities in Saudi Arabia. So real changes ahead if we continue on our current path. And so as we think about jobs and economy, what do you think it does to the jobs that are dependent on workers outside? Farmers, fisher people, construction workers, forestry. Let's add to that soldiering. Let's add to that police work. It makes their jobs a lot more dangerous, and it makes them a lot harder to continue to have the same sort of productivity. Increased heat lowers human productivity. Increased heat lowers crop yields. Increased heat harms infrastructure. Things like our roads, our bridges, they begin to buckle. They don't work as well. You can't take off a tarmac if it's too hot. So you can quickly see how this one part of climate change, heat, has real ramifications for jobs and economy, especially in the Southeast, which has such a big dependence on these types of jobs. But heat isn't only in America, it's going to get worse all over the globe. This is a chart from the World Economic Forum, taking a look at where they expect by 2070 parts of our globe to have Saharan-like temperatures during the summer, things that currently are in the Saharan desert. So that's all of the checkered areas. And the thing that is so concerning about that is that that is also the area where 1/3 of humanity is projected to live. So again, what do we think could happen if vast swaths of the globe become so hot it's very difficult to live there? Migration, right? Wars over diminishing supplies. So again, heat impacting our global stability. Let's quickly move to food. This is from the World Resource Institute, which is a nonpartisan group, and they took a look at what would happen at a 3 C increase, which is, I'm sorry if that's echoing, a 3 degree, it still is, right? Can you not hear? Okay, it's just a 3 C increase, which is the same as a 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit increase. And what we see in red are areas that are predicted to lose significant quantities of their crop yields. The dark red is as much as 50%. And again, this is kind of the path we are currently on. So this is not some extreme case. And what we see is that while northern climes actually increase their ability to grow food, it's far away from the population centers. And the places that we depend on today, the Rice Bowl in China, our Midwest breadbasket, or what I call the salad bar and wine cellar of America in California, all lose their ability to produce food at the current amount. And we're feeling it right now. Have you guys bought chocolate, coffee, or olive oil this year? Yeah, right? And that's because the places that are growing these crops are becoming so hot, they are no longer as ideal for these crops that have been there for thousands of years. I was just in Spain this summer, and there were trees that were 1,000 years old that were dying because it was just too darn hot. And so we're feeling it today, but our kids and grandkids are going to feel it on a much different level in the future. And of course, heat isn't just on land, and food isn't just on land, it's also in our oceans. And this graphic shows that our oceans are heating up dramatically, in some areas as much as 4 degrees hotter since 1900. And this has real ramifications, again, for our food, because it's bleaching out the coral reefs, which are nurseries to about 1/4 of all marine sea life. But it also has real ramifications for the types of hurricanes we're experiencing, because of course, nature uses hurricanes to cool off our oceans, right? So as we are seeing is that our patterns of hurricanes are changing. It's not that they're getting more of them, but we're getting more big ones. And they are forming further away from the equator and staying more powerful further away from the equator, which means that more areas will be impacted in the future. Now, anyone want to guess where this extreme rainstorm caused this type of refugee flow? Any guesses? North Carolina.
In the mountains.
Mountains, right? Washington, D.C., Maryland, Texas, New Orleans, Colorado, let's see, Pakistan, China. It's happening everywhere. And the reason it's happening is just physics, because the oceans are hotter, which allows more water to evaporate. The atmosphere is hotter, which allows the atmosphere to hold more water vapor. For every degree Celsius it goes up, it can hold 7% more water vapor. And so that means that when conditions are right, it's more likely to have these cataclysmic rain floods instead of restorative showers. And it's really happening all around the world, as you can see, and all around our country from this chart. Even in places that are typically dry, they're getting more often these dangerous forms of rain versus the good forms of rain. And what this means is we have this really whacked out water system, because sometimes it's so hot and it's so dry that we get these droughts and we simply don't have enough water. And other times we have these floods that come and inundate us and we have too much water. And when those floods inundate us, they also inundate our human systems. They inundate our waste management systems, our sewers. They inundate where we hold our chemicals. They inundate our infrastructure. And so there's all sorts of pollution that comes from that. And then after the waters recede, of course, there's all sorts of diseases like typhoid and cholera and just plain old mold that follow. So our water systems are getting much trickier because of climate change. And speaking of water, we must talk about our oceans and sea level rise, because you are a coastal state. The oceans are rising. They've risen 7 inches since 1900, and it's accelerating. Most of that has happened in the last 50 years. It is rising for 2 reasons. One, the land ice is melting in the glaciers, and that land ice is now running down to the sea. And the second is because the water is getting hotter, as we saw in an earlier chart, and that means the oceans are thermally expanding. What's ahead? Well, most experts predict 1 foot to even 1.5 feet by mid-century, and as 3 by end of century, and as much as 6. And there are oceanographers that warn that we have set much more in motion, maybe as much as 25 feet, but it will be spread over the next centuries. So the fact of the matter is we know that we've actually set something in motion that we can't pull back, but it's a question of how fast it will come and how much time we will have to prepare and adapt. And for many of you who may have homes on the shore, it's kind of a depressing topic. And I'm sorry to share it with you, but I think we need to be clear-eyed about what the risks are. This is a graphic from Climate Central taking a look at land in red that is projected to be underwater on an annual basis at least once a year by 2050. And obviously, as we get further into the century, there's a lot more red as we go. And again, remember that the property values diminish way before you start getting inundated every single year, right? So we are looking at a big reckoning on our shore properties coming forward. Climate change is also impacting our health. The health medical institutions have all come out loudly, clearly, strongly, and over that climate change is a huge hit to our health. In fact, they call it the #1 public health concern. And part of the reason is that there's a lot of bad things that come with getting too hot, right? It can lead to heat stress, heat stroke. It aggravates cardiovascular disease. It causes preterm labor and premature birth. Same thing. It also ratchets up aggression, including murders, violent crime, and suicide. It causes kidney disease because it would get so dried out. Severe burns, one you probably haven't thought about, but if you fall on a super hot day and you're in Phoenix and you hit the mailbox or you hit the pavement, you're burned. So it is a big deal when it gets that hot. And then the last one, I think, is critically important because climate change exacerbates air pollution. It makes smog worse. And that means there's more of those nasty little particulates that come into our lungs and through our lungs into our bloodstream, causing all sorts of inflammation. So climate change is not good for our bodies. And it's not good also because we are afflicted now with more diseases from the pests, the vector diseases like Zika, West Nile, malaria, and someone else say that for me. And the Southeast is one of the areas where mosquitoes are rising the most. So it's definitely an area you guys want to keep your eye on. Not just mosquitoes are increasing, but also our growing season is extending, which means our pollen seasons are extending and our pollen levels are going up, which aggravates asthma and allergies. So even people who historically have not will probably have more problems as we go forward. And we can see just how many more days that you are exposed today versus back in 1970. Another thing that I have to mention, even though wildfires may not be such a big deal right now, right here, is that it has been noticed that wildfires are spreading so quickly in so many different geographies, and they're burning more ferociously. It's just because things are tinder dry. So dry that when a spark hits, whether natural or human cause, it's more likely to become a conflagration. And that is devastating for the communities right there, but it also is damaging to our air quality hundreds of miles away. And in fact, the scientists have come out and said that by 2050, they believe that this issue will be our #1 climate change issue because the wildfire smoke can't be corralled and it moves just so far. Now, have you guys noticed it seems like there are a lot more big natural disasters than there used to be? Like every time you turn on your TV, right? Well, that's because there are. This chart shows how big ones, $1 billion or bigger, have been ratcheting up. And that actually 2023 was the biggest year and 2024 close behind. Now, I want to say something really, really important here. We are putting a bullseye on our backs. We are moving into areas that are close to the oceans where hurricanes come and fire-prone areas where fires come. So literally, scientists say we're putting a bullseye on our backs. If we weren't there, if we weren't building our homes, those numbers wouldn't be so high. But we are there, and these disasters are coming faster, and they're more powerful when they come. And they're coming so fast we don't have time to regroup. They used to come every 3 months, now they're coming every 3 weeks. And so again, a real hit to our jobs and economy when they hit, right? And our safety and personal health when we're in the center of that damage. And no surprise, this is putting pressure on our very, very important system of insurance. This is a graphic from the New York Times showing all the areas that are currently experiencing pressure on insurance prices or the ability to get insurance at all from major carriers. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. And luckily for those of us who are going to be looking to buy a house, hello, we now have the ability to look ahead and get a sense of what a property exposure to climate risks would be in the future. This is from Zillow, and they put it out on every single listing. So you can take a look and see how this property is expected to be exposed to climate risk in the future. And about 50% of properties have some significant risk. The problem is, though, there are areas where insurance may not be available for long. And this is something that no other than our Fed Reserve Chair has warned about, talking about the fact that banks and insurance will pull out of areas that are just too dangerous and too expensive to insure, right? And what he is projecting that in 10 to 15 years that there will be regions of the country where we literally just can't get a mortgage. Now let's think about this for a quick second. If you can't get a mortgage, then what happens to your property value? You can't sell it, right? So what happens if mortgage and property values are no longer true? What happens to the values of mortgage-backed securities? If property values are dropping, what happens to municipal tax bases? If property taxes are dropping and municipal tax bases are not as robust, what happens to municipal bonds? If you can't have insurance and you have to build a road, a prison, a big bridge, what happens to our ability to do long-term financing? Now, I'm sure we're going to figure this out. I'm just saying this is a really big deal, and we haven't figured it out yet. And it means that there's going to be a lot of pressures on some of the things that we value the most, like our homes, right? It's our biggest asset. But it's not just our homes that are at risk. It's also our investments. This is from the S&P Global, looking ahead and taking a look at 2050, which sectors are expected to be stressed by climate change physical impacts. And these are, of course, I think, areas where many of us currently invest, hopefully, again, for our financial security. Okay. Put this all together, and what does it mean? It means we have real stress coming on our local GDP and our national GDP and our global GDP. Let's start with local. This is from BlackRock, showing areas of stagnation or decline in the darker colors, areas where they kind of stay status quo in the yellow, and areas of growth in the green, simply due to climate change impacts as we get to the second part of the century. And now let's go nationally. This is from Deloitte, the world's largest professional service company. And it's not Deloitte, Swiss Re. I mean, they're all saying the same thing. In a climate change world, by 2070, the US would lose nearly 4% of GDP, or $1.5 trillion every single year, if we continue on our current emissions path. And that's due to labor productivity, agricultural productivity, infrastructure damage, health impairment. Real hits to our jobs and economy, our health and security, right? And as you all already surmised, when you have all these pressures all around the world, it means a lot of disruption. It means refugee flows and migration flows unlike anything the US has seen before. And really intriguingly is that scientists also predict that a lot of Southerners are going to find the Deep South too hot and the economy too limited, and that we will see intra-US migration up towards north to get to more economically viable areas. And of course, we share this world with a lot of other species. Any of you birders? Yes, I always have birders in all my audiences. I love birders. So then it's no surprise to you that the Audubon Society says that 2/3 of North American birds are threatened by climate change. 2/3. Again, what does that mean for our grandchildren? What will their dawn chorus sound like if there aren't the birds that we enjoy today? And it's not just birds, it's also plants. What we're finding is a lot of species are struggling to adapt, to move to places where they can thrive, including the spruce forest right here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I know that I've shared a lot of depressing stuff with you. And I'm going to pick you up right now. I promise I'm going to pick you up. But I want you just to step back for a minute and say, the stuff I've shared with you, these forecasts, they don't have to be 100% right to make us know we don't want to even let them be possible, right? Anywhere else in our lives, when the consequences were this drastic, even if we weren't 100% sure they were going to be that bad, we would take action to lessen the risk. It's what you do with home insurance, right? You know your house is going to burn down? No, but you take smart action. You close the fire doors, you buy smart appliances, you buy the insurance so that if it does happen, you can bounce back. Scientists say it's much more likely that climate change will impact you in a very big way than your house burning down. But we aren't according it the proper respect. Now, I read the same pundits you do, and I know there are a lot of pundits who say, hey, those models overrepresent the risk. Don't worry about it. But what I don't hear those pundits talking about are the scientists on the other side who say, ooh, you know, actually the models underrepresent the risk because they don't capture the things that are less likely to happen soon, but if they do happen, would be really catastrophic, like tipping points. Tipping points are things like the melting of the permafrost up in the Arctic, which is melting faster than any, or warming faster than any other part of our globe. And that means that organisms that froze before they decayed are now decaying en masse, putting up plumes of carbon dioxide and methane. And that's something that if it got too great, humans could never put back in the bottle. So on one side, we have the group that says, hey, don't worry, to be happy. And on the other side, we have the group saying, drink heavily, the Titanic's going down. And we have the vast majority of scientists in the middle saying this is a real and credible threat, and there are smart things that we can do right now to lower the risk. And we're supposed to make a bet. And we're supposed to make that bet not just for ourselves, but for everyone on the planet, and not for everyone on the planet, but for future generations as far off as we can envision. And we have to ask ourselves, how would a prudent person make that bet? Okay, I'm going to pick you up right now. Let's jump into that third section. Can I have a time check on where we stand? 15, thank you. So let's jump into how difficult or expensive is it to avoid the risk, and this is the good news. Fact is, it's getting much easier and much less expensive to lessen the risk. And why is that? Well, first off, importantly, we have come globally to understand that the cost of inaction is much greater than the cost of action. We now know that if we avoid this risk, it could overwhelm us and only get more expensive. The old equation was, hey, don't worry about climate change. It's going to hit far-off places and far-off people. Let them deal with it when they're ready. Let's strengthen our economy today. Remember that one? New equation is, whoop, climate change is happening right now, right here, and as taxpayers, we are on the hook to pay for it, both to repair from all these natural disasters, but also to prepare, to build all of the infrastructure, trying to keep ourselves secure because nature is playing by a new set of normals. And at the same time, the cost of inaction is just ratcheting up. We're seeing it right now, and the projections are so frightening. At that same time, the cost to moving to a lower carbon economy, to putting up less emissions that are causing this, they're dropping precipitously in price, so much so it makes sense to do it whether or not you believe in climate change. So the world is pivoting right now, and they are looking to create a more affordable, reliable, and safer energy system. And the ways that we know that we have to do it is, first, we have to find a way to use fossil fuels more safely. 80% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. It's not going away tomorrow. We are going to be using fossil fuels for a fair amount of time in the future. So we've got to find ways to use it more safely. 2, we need to innovate. We can't just depend on the old technologies of the 1950s. We need to come up with the new technologies of the 2020s. And we are doing that. And there are so many exciting new products coming and system work coming that will be a game changer in the future if we can get them out there fast enough. We have to build a modern grid. Our grid is like the highway system, the road system before Eisenhower built the highways. We need the superhighways that will allow energy to get from far-off places to population centers that is flexible, that is more protected from hackers and from natural disasters. And we know how to do that. And we need to electrify everything we can. And I'm not picking a winner or a loser here. It's because electrification is a better form of energy. Why? Because it's more efficient. Who here has a combustion engine car? Everybody, right? When you put your hand on the car after you've driven it, is it hot? Yes. Who here has an electric car? When you put your car on your trunk, on your hood, is it hot? No. That is because in a combustion car, 2/3 of the energy is wasted in heat. Only 1/3 of that energy is actually pushing the car forward. And electric cars is like 85%. And so it's really just a more efficient use of energy. We can do more with less electrification than we can with the molecules and fossil fuels. And so that's why people think that electrification is such a critical next step once we make a new grid. Use energy more efficiently. There's so many different ways that we can do that, even on the grid with grid enhancing technologies, but also in our own personal lives. And of course, we need to make sure we can find the materials we need for the products of the future. And that's true in our chips as well as some of our new clean energy sources. So let's talk about using fossil fuels better, more safely. One of the big problems with natural gas, which is growing, and part of its growing is because of our support and the fact that we are now exporting it around the world, is that from its production to its shipping to its end use, there are a lot of leaks. And that leaks is of methane, which is really a super polluter. It is about 60% more powerful at capturing the heat, but it only lasts a few decades, unlike carbon dioxide, which lasts longer. But it's still considered a super polluter because it captures so much heat. So one of the things we can do is stop methane leaks. And it's hard to see them, but this video, hello, Jackson, thank you, shows a normal flare of carbon dioxide at this station in Texas. And this is just them venting it out to the sky. And this is happening all around the world every single day. And this is not that hard to fix. And it's the #1 thing that we could do that would quickly stop the temperature from going up so fast. The other thing that we can do is carbon capture. And we're doing quite a lot of it at the factory level, but there's also a lot of investment going in on capturing it from the air. These are vacuum cleaners sucking in the carbon, and they sell it for useful purposes. This one is in Switzerland, selling it to a Coca-Cola plant to put fizz into seltzers and Cokes. But we know that we also need to come up with newer, firm, which means available all the time, 24/7 energy that is clean. And so it's really exciting because there's a lot of progress. One of them is nuclear. We're all reading about nuclear. The US is pushing forward nuclear in a big way. And that's both in big ones, as was recently announced by the administration, but also in small ones, including this cute little one. Is it cute? It's kind of cute. Yes, that fits on a flatbed truck. And these can be slotted in an abandoned coal plant and tied into the grid. These can be slotted into a data center and be off the grid. You could stack 4 of them. Each one powers about 300,000 homes. And they could be built in a factory, so they think it would be much safer. They use molten salt instead of water. So there's a lot of new ingenuity coming. And there's a lot of hope here. Our first one is expected to be built by 2030. China and Russia already have built them. So we will be seeing these. And our challenge is to make sure they're safe, right? Because they're going to be in our neighborhoods and manufacturing plants. But a lot of people believe that nuclear is a necessary part of the way forward. Not your grandma's geothermal. This is a new type of geothermal that we have learned from our oil drilling techniques. We can go down so deep, it's the same equivalent to 50 Statue of Liberties standing on its heads. That's how deep we can now go. And that means we can access heat in places we never could use it before. It is too clean 24/7. You will be seeing geothermal in all sorts of places really soon. Fusion. Anyone know what fusion is? Fission, you break an atom. Fusion, you mush them together. It's a different kind of nuclear. It's clean, it's abundant, it can be done anywhere. It's always been out of reach, kind of science fiction-y. Now it is expected to be on the grid in the next 20 years. So hold on to your caps. There's a lot of investment and a lot of excitement around this emerging technology. It hasn't put any energy out yet, but there's real hope. But even as we talk about the new kids on the block, so to speak, we have to understand that renewables are driving the show right now. And that is because they are just so darn cheap and are expected to drop so much more. So this graph shows how the levelized cost of energy, which is apples to apples, non-subsidized energy, has changed back from 2010. So the yellow is solar. You can see how high it was and now how low it is. The green is wind, how middle it was and how low it is. And then the black and brown are fossil fuels. And so what we can see is that already wind and solar on an apples-to-apples basis are about 40% cheaper than the closest fossil fuel. That is something that's happened so rapidly that it's kind of taken the world by surprise. But countries are noticing and are doubling down. And just to give you another perspective, so this is utility solar. It used to be 414% more expensive than fossil fuels. And in 2023, it was 56% more inexpensive. And onshore wind used to be 23% more, and now it's 67% less expensive than the closest fossil fuels. So it's changing the cards in our hands to have these technologies that can handle more of the load. My assistant put this in. I hadn't seen it before. So here is the cool thing, is that we also have batteries emerging at a scorchingly fast rate. They're dropping in prices so fast, and they're being adopted so many places on the grid, and at data centers, and at homes, all sorts of places. And I hope this resonates with you the way it did. Batteries are changing the paradigm. It's going to change how our electricity system works, because now we have to make electricity at the exact same time we need it. We can't, or we haven't been able to save it. So it's kind of like before we had refrigerators, we had to go to the market every day, buy what we needed then, use it that day, and then go again the next day, right? And then we got refrigerators, and we could actually go once and buy a bunch and store it and use it when we wanted to. Batteries are the refrigerators of the grid system. They enable us to capture the energy, buy it, capture it when it's super duper cheap, when they're throwing it away because we have way too much solar or way too much wind, and then use it when the energy is expensive or when we don't have enough. It allows them to play a much bigger role going forward in stabilizing the grid and allowing us to use the cheaper energy for a bigger portion of our energy needs. Did that resonate? Okay, good. All right, so what we're seeing is the world is noticing 40% of our energy now comes from renewables, and they're growing rapidly. Renewables are supposed to be 6 times more by 2050. That's how fast they're growing, so hold on to your hats. And it means that in all the world's biggest emitters, China, which is #1, the US is #2, India is #3, renewables are the cheapest new form of energy to add to the grid. And what we're seeing is that the markets are responding. 93% of all new power this year is in these renewable sources. Now, we do think that in the next couple of years, we're going to see a slowdown because a lot of the projects that were slated to come on have been pushed back due to the administration's new position on renewables. So we will see the momentum slow in the United States, but it will not stop. And again, it's because the economics are just too good to let it stop. So across the world, dollars are shifting, more than double investment in clean energy versus in fossil fuels. And what this means is that the International Energy Agency, the vulnerable group that was set up really to protect energy flows around the world, predicts that the sooner we make the investment into these new technologies, the sooner we'll be able to save on a household basis. And it's working. A lot of really interesting places are getting a ton of their electricity from renewables. Iowa gets 66%, Oklahoma 41%. But guess what the state that makes the biggest amount of renewable energy is? Yes, Texas. The great state of Texas, #1 in wind, fast overtaking California to be #1 in solar, and also becoming the leader in batteries. And that meant that on a day in September, Texas ran 80% of its economy, which is the 8th largest in the world, on renewable power for a big chunk of the day. So if Texas can do it, clearly a lot of places can do it. And what we're seeing is that during the Ukrainian crisis, when oil and gas went through the roof cost-wise, because Texas had so many renewables in their mix, they had remarkable savings, up to $11 billion. And I want to make a note that we do have problems with renewables. They are not perfect. We need to figure out all sorts of ways to make them better. But there are also a lot of innovative ways they're being used. Here in France, they are now going to be on every big parking lot. Why not? These are 3D solar panels that almost look like sculpture, that are much more efficient than the actual solid rows of panels that are just coming out to market, which are kind of intriguing. I mean, I could almost see those behind a museum or something, right? Because it's really artistic. This is on a brownfield on an old coal mining area. This is a irrigation canal in California where they've used the solar panels to protect the water and keep the evaporation down. And this is a windmill that is capturing the turbulence from the taking off and landing planes. And there's also ways we can use it better on our farmland, because that's obviously, we don't want our prime farmland to go. In many areas, they're finding that certain crops, especially root vegetables, tomatoes, and even wine grapes, are doing better under the solar panels because it keeps them cooler. And sheep, too, are actually doing better. You can see they're a lot happier. But the panels allow for better biodiversity of the grasses, and it means that the sheep's meat and wool is actually improved. So we have some win-wins there. And talk about ask me in the Q&A, but new forms of storage are coming rapidly that are super, super exciting, that will give us even greater flexibility. And we should know that lots of jobs are being created all around the country. 80% of all new energy jobs are now in the clean energy arena. But we have a challenge, and that is our pricing is beginning to skyrocket, and our demand is getting really hard to meet. And you guys know this in Virginia more than almost any other state because of the clusters of AI centers that are coming. And there's a real question of how we meet this demand, especially at a time when prices are already so high. And again, what we're finding is that renewables are becoming the first choice. And I will tell you why. Because they use sunbeams and wind for their fuel, and there is enough sun hitting the Earth every hour to power the entire Earth's economy for a year. There's enough wind hitting the US in a day to power our economy 9 times over. So if we can capture it and find ways to use it effectively, it's an unlimited source. It provides energy sovereignty. What that means is we can do it locally. We can create that energy right in our own communities, or definitely within our own country, and not be dependent on an exterior, outside petrostate to be sending it in. And so the fact it's local and gives us energy independence is really important. These technologies have been around for a long time. They are getting better by the nanosecond, and they're getting cheaper by the nanosecond. But they have been a long time. They are not newfangled. They haven't been tested. They are, in some ways, very secure. At this point, they're much more affordable than fossil fuels. Again, they can't take 100% of them because they still are not that firm energy, but they sure can take a huge portion of it. And they are much quicker to get to market than natural gas, which is now taking about 5 to 6 years, and or nuclear, which is now expected to take 10 plus. And so when you add it all together, there's real market demand to see renewables in this country and around the world continue to grow. We have another challenge, that China, which is still the largest emitter, still putting up coal plants, is also by far the world leader in the clean technologies. They set out 15 years ago to be the singular superpower in this arena, and man, did they do it. They are outspending us tremendously. They spent more than the US, EU, and UK together. Clean tech was responsible for 26% of their GDP growth last year. And they're considered the world's first electrostate. They are gaining international power by exporting these new technologies around the world. And just to give you a sense of just how lopsided it is, this is our clean energy patents. The red is China. Battery manufacturing capacity, the red is China. Renewables, the red is China. Electrification, the red is China. And they're doing some really interesting things, like building electric vehicles that are $7,800 and go 300 miles on a charge, right? So why can't we do that? And electric vehicles are growing so rapidly around the world. Almost a quarter of all new sales are electric vehicles. And they have taken the equivalent of taken Germany, all of Germany's emissions out of the equation because of electric vehicles displacing oil. So they're making a difference already, and they're expected to continue to grow, especially globally. And China is out innovating us and coming up with the new ideas. This is a solar plant on the oceans. And this is a solar plant that they just announced they're going to do in space, capturing the energy and microwaving it down. Innovation across our sectors are coming, from transportation to industry to building to design, to what we eat, how we grow it, to how we build our homes. And this is kind of cool. It's a nano paint. It's white paint that has little nanoparticles in it that enable that solar radiance to come down and be reflected at a level that gets past some of the greenhouse gases. So you're going to tell me about that, okay? Okay. Okay, and innovation is happening in our farmlands on how we can better capture carbon in our soils instead of exuding it, and recognition of the power of nature in absorbing the carbon and how important it is to protect these natural spaces, that it has economic value to do so, is rising. But we are in a race, and we are not winning the race. At the time of the Paris Accords, we were on this brown line, really going up to scary levels. We have come down through the policies enacted to this brown line here. Again, right now being about 5 degrees Fahrenheit with our current policies. We have promised policies that haven't been enacted yet that could get us down to the gold line, but where we need to get is to the green line, which means pedal to the metal. We need to drop emissions as soon as feasible. And what we decide to do matters, because carbon dioxide stays in the air in parts for up to 1,000 years. And that means that the carbon dioxide we put out today, starting our car, turning on our gas stove, will be in the atmosphere for generations as far out as we can see. And every generation will have a bigger burden than the one before it, including, of course, the baby betas, which are the ones being born right now, today, in 2025. So hopefully you are with me. Climate change is indeed happening. The potential risks are not ones that we want to have come to pass. And we have the tools, right, to try to do something about it. So first off, we need to recognize this is not a political issue. This is a human issue. It impacts the things we all care about, and we need to come together to address it. We need to talk about it. Scientists say that people do not talk about this topic. People don't understand how much concern there is out there, so we need to raise our voices and let it be known that this is something important to us. Use your networks to help mobilize other people in knowledge and caring about the issue. Tell your political leaders, whatever side of the aisle you vote on, tell them that you care about this issue, because there are a lot of conservative ways of meeting this issue. And quite honestly, there are a lot of conservative leaders who say they want to move on this if their voters give them cover to do so. So raise your voice there as well. Support broader climate education at schools. Engage at the local level. That's where you have the most power. Is that my clue to get off? Take personal action, and then make sure you talk about it. Just doing it in quiet doesn't do the trick. The whole thing we need to do is spread the ripple of influence. Say, hey, I'm eating less meat because it makes me feel healthier and it's better for the client. I will tell you that other people will think about it. So when you take personal action, please, please talk about it. And also make sure that we let our leaders know that we support science and we support investment in these new technologies. We are the first generation to understand the risks of climate change. We are the first generation to feel it already on the backs of our shoulders. We are the first generation to understand that we are leaving a potentially broken and dystopian world for our kids and our grandkids. And we are the first generation to have the tools to do something about it. So the question for all of us in this room, and quite honestly, all of us on the planet, is what will we choose to do? Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Do the survey, and we drop them off on a table outside. And also, I'm so sorry we didn't have time for questions, but this is where you can reach me if we don't reach, because I really want to hear from you, and I really want to help in any way we can in helping you raise your voices, because we have a lot of things at Sea Change that can help. So if you reach out to us, we'll reach right back out. Thank you.